Morning and welcome to the Louisiana Department of Ed 2020 Teacher Leaders Summit virtual series. My name's Sharon and I'll be your host and moderator for this session this morning. And you are attending session E059, Reengaging Family Childcare Providers. Now I'm going to turn everything over to your presenters this morning. And we have Brittany, Susan, and Eric for you guys. Let me know if you have questions or comments by posting in the chat.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, we'd like to welcome you to our session. Thank you so much for taking the time out to just join us as we talk a little bit about our journey over the first year of really working with our pilot that we've just partnered with two really important agencies at the department. I'm Susan Clark. I am the manager of the Family Child Care Pilot, and I work with strategy for Birth to 5 on our PDG grant. And co-hosting and co-presenting with me today would be two awesome researchers that also help us on this track from LSU, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Brittany Wittenberg. I'm an assistant professor at Louisiana State University in the Child and Family Studies program. And we've been working with Dr. Clark and the LDOE team since last June or July.
Hi, my name is Dr. Erin Harmeyer, and I'm an assistant professor of professional practice and program director of the Child and Family Studies program at Louisiana State University, and have been working with Dr. Wittenberg and with Susan on this project that we're going to tell you all about.
Thank you. So as we go through the presentation, we know that you may have lots of questions, so you're more than welcome to use the chat box. We'll monitor that. We plan for this to be as interactive and kind of sort of conversational as possible. There's a lot of information we want to just share with you as far as our pilot, where we started, how we engaged family child care providers, and really how all this came about. So again, we really appreciate you all taking just your time to come out and speak with us and just to hear about this project and to really go this journey with us as we think about what does this look like and how we can move forward. So on our agenda for the day, we're going to talk a little bit about Louisiana's overall vision for early childhood. As you think about and listen about how the department has been talking about it for a while, this may look familiar, but we're going to just come at it from a different perspective. We'll talk a little bit about just class in Louisiana, the overall view of family child care in Louisiana, our pilot and some of our initial class results, some perceptions of what it looked like as we thought about doing this pilot with family child care and using class. Both of our wonderful researchers from LSU are going to talk a little bit about the research that they did. We're going to share with you some lessons learned, and then we hope to use our remaining time just to have a little discussion, or if there are any particular questions you have for us to go through that as well. So just to start off, I want to take a minute to kind of sort of frame things and ask these 4 questions. 1, how many of you may have attended home-based childcare, may have sent your child or children to home-based care, or maybe you plan on sending your child or your children to care, or may have known a person or people that provided care for children in their home. And we'll take just a few minutes, and you can maybe just raise your hand or drop a comment in the comment box and just say, you know, me, yes, to really frame how we're thinking about all of this. I see some hands. Yep, I know people who provided care. Yes, I've provided care. So good. So I'm glad to see that as we're thinking about this, that you all really can connect with this on some form or some different level. A little bit about myself is that, guess what? I attended home-based child care. I sent my children to home-based child care. And I know other people who've done the same. So as we approach this, we really thought about some of the experiences of home-based providers just from a varying lens and various perspectives. You guys have to bear with me. My computer's taking its time as we transition. So when we think of family child care, these are some images we typically, think of, or as we've talked about with other people in other states and providers, and we've heard conversations, we've got just an array of ideas and images. And so as we thought about family child care and how we approach it in the state of Louisiana, we wanted to keep all those things at the forefront and really be intentional as we moved forward with thinking about how do we bring family child care into the landscape of our early childhood portfolio. So let's chat. So what is the perception or landscape of home-based or family child care in each one of your own communities? And you can just, in the chat box, just drop just maybe one or two words that you can think of that may describe how people see or what's the perception of what child care looks like, family child care. So lucky to have it. Some people say people like home care. We've got some that may think that it's small and individualized. Someone says it varies greatly. Some people's quality is not consistent. It's hard to find. Guess what? 2 thumbs up again for us. I'm glad to know that all the things that you all are sharing with us, we are aware as we approach this pilot that those are some of the varying perceptions when we think about family child care in communities, not just here, but as we really worked and had conversations with other states who are also looking at how to engage family child care providers and how to do this work, that was right along the same lines. So let's talk about Louisiana's overall vision for early childhood and ed. So prior to the enactment of reform in 2012, Louisiana's overall statewide early childhood system was it was fragmented. And we really looked at it and it prepared not a lot of kids to really enter kindergarten really and be successful. So prior to 2012, the programs are really siloed. And what we saw was there was no coordination in administration of programs. We saw that some of the use of those fundings, it was limited and it was inefficient. We saw that there wasn't really an overall unified way of looking at quality across Head Start, child care, school system. The support was limited for those that were really trying to navigate, how do I look at this system? I'm thinking about early childhood. I'm thinking about child care. And they didn't really have any tools for working around through that. And then overall, when we look at kids, the overall consensus was they really weren't ready to enter kindergarten at a level that we were prepared to say that we could measure success. So in 2012, the legislature enacted Act 3. And what it did was it really made purposeful and intentional progress towards achieving 3 main goals. The first one is really looking at how do we unify all early childhood programs that fall under a LDOE, which is the one governing body, to start looking at establishing community networks in every one of those communities in the state. That way they could really look at addressing coordinating enrollment and looking at funding and thinking about the early childhood community as a whole and as a network that really thought about the individual needs of each one of your individual communities that go throughout the state. Looking at statewide unified quality rating system. And so we know that that's every public funded child that goes through those programs and in those sites. Which is roughly about 1,600. We know that we use class. And that's the way we really look at quality when we think about rating and how do we unify things throughout the state. And then the fourth is also looking at how do we align quality improvement within that unified quality rating system. So it's not just to say, you know, well, this is quality, but how do we also then think about how are we intentional about putting improvement supports in place to help those different programs achieve an acceptable level of quality. You all may have seen this a lot when we talk about our unified early childhood system. This is how we think about it in those 4 buckets. We think about how do we expand access? How do we then prepare teachers? Are we having quality interactions for kids from birth to 5? And then what are those instructional tools that we can really work to support, making sure there's developmentally appropriate practices and standard-based tools, and thinking about curriculum and assessment. So one of the big things for us is we believe that every day in Louisiana, educators are committed to ensuring that every child has the opportunity to grow and thrive. And the overall vision is that all children enter kindergarten and we're making sure that they're ready to learn. Again, just us thinking about what does that look like. So it's one thing to have that vision and to say that, but then how do we break it apart and really think about what are the individual pieces that go toward preparing kids birth to 5. So we believe that it requires being able to respond to children, their emotional needs, making sure they're organized and we can manage the attention, time, and behavior. Make sure that we are promoting learning that's engaging through rich and engaging language and interactions, and then making sure that there's support there for the teachers so they can develop and work with their level of high quality and having instructional tools. So this a little bit about our overall timeline as we've thought about and being very, very intentional about how then do we really create this system, and we think about those 4 goals. And as you look at this, you can see lots of, you know, just progress from 2013 up until now. But one of the things that we realized and we noticed is while we were doing this work and we were really, really trudging ahead, we're really thinking about and being intentional about working with the communities and working with centers and really thinking about who provides care and what group of care. We were also missing a very, very important component and source of preparation and care for children in our state. And so that's one of the things we thought about addressing. How do we fix that? And so that really comes to play when we think about our overall quality rating system. We know that we use class. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. And with class, we know it measures the quality of interactions, and we know that it's broken into different domains, but the overall expectations for a classroom or a setting and work with children, making sure that there's warm, positive environment where there are trusting relationships, making sure that there are daily routines that are not just there, but they're in place, they're organized, and then we really think about how are we minimizing any disruptions. And then children are also supported, and they're supported through learning different concepts. They have the opportunity in being supported through their language development. And then it all connects with ideas through dialogue and play. In Louisiana, we use our performance profiles rating. They're published, and it's got 2 main components. We look at the actual performance rating, and that's where each one of the site gets a rating, and it's based on class, it's based on observations, and it looks at the quality of interactions with the adults. And then the informal metrics is more about the profile of the particular site. And it uses and it talks about things as far as best practices, curriculum, children for learning, credentialing, and teachers. So with our performance rating, there are incentives as well as consequences for any site that participates in the overall rating system. And some of those incentives are increased tax credits, and then some of those consequences are mandatory participation in improvement planning. And just here, this is just a sample chart of a class range or a class score, what the performance was, the particular star ratings that may be tied to that, and then sites in 2019 that fell in each one of those areas. So another one of the perks of being able to fall under Louisiana's Unified Quality Rating System is that with those performance profiles, there's an opportunity for those sites to really shine and be published on our Louisiana State School and Center Finder website. And it's really an interactive website that's designed to help families navigate and browse and learn about all their options for childcare. And as they learn, they really get to understand about those particular ratings and those particular performance profiles of the state. When you break down each one of those, they also have a tab that talks about the academic performance. And this is where a family can find information specifically about what is the rating of a particular site. And then it explains how it's measured and how those things are broken down. So again, just really thinking about one, having that quality rating system, but then also addressing the issue of helping families navigate and have choice and access to what's the best fit for them. I'm gonna take a minute here just to talk about a little bit of the data. And I know it seems like a lot, but I just want you all to understand that this is what the state really focused on. And this is really how the quality rating system was built and how performance profiles really came about and the importance of these things. So once those unified quality systems rating systems were implemented, what we saw was steady improvement in classroom quality each one of the years. So you can see that from 2016 to 2019, there was a shift in centers and sites that scored and moved from unsatisfactory to moving to approaching proficient, high proficient, and even excellent. When we look at the quality rating system and using class, there's also been steady improvement in each one of the domains in pre-K and in toddler class. So again, if we look at the data from 2016 to 2019, we can steadily see slow gains and improvement to where we've really made some tracks at saying, okay, this is where we started, and then targeting and using very structured and having a process for looking at addressing issues and coaching and supporting those particular centers. We've seen a steady growth in both of those domains over the times from 2016 to 2019. And again, if we look at program types overall, when we compare early childhood learning centers to early Head Start and Head Starts in school, there's still that gain and that improvement. It's not been isolated to just one particular area, but we've really seen an overall gain in each one. So while we've seen the increase, we've seen that there's been lots of local investment in those tools, early childhood coordinators, local observers, coaches, site administrators. Each one of these are important components and really playing a part in what has been the key to improvement year after year. And we've worked with class observations. We've had, the class is really big on defining what quality looks like in the field. And it really also serves not only as a tool for measuring those interactions, but the way it's laid out, it also was wonderful for coaching and professional development. So again, it provides us metrics as far as what's happening in those classrooms, but it's also multifaceted in giving us tools and resources we need as we think about how do we move from one step to the other.
Hi, Susan. This is Brittany.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brittany.
No, you're fine. I'm sorry to interrupt. We have a couple questions about the class tool. And
yes.
They're asking, does Louisiana use various assessment tools just besides class? And then also, is class the overall best tool for use in this setting?
So right now for us, class is what we use when we talk about quality. We really look at the interactions, the quality of the interactions. That's what we've honed in and focused on. And as far as better or best, that's just what we've identified as far as in these particular settings. This is what the legislator, what we've looked at and done some research on and worked with as far as that's what's been the best fit for our definition of quality. I'll be honest, different places, different states have different measures and different tools and different metrics. It's kind of sort of based on what is the best fit for you all, or what is the best fit for a different state, or what is the best fit. So for us, we've landed on class when thinking about early childhood. And it's really those particular interactions. How do providers interact, like I said, with those within those domains with children in their care? Let's see, what other questions? I'm sorry. So I know that that's a lot and it's a mouthful. And if you're like I am, I've worked at the department for a year. And when I came on board, I was like, oh, all of this makes sense. But the one remaining question I had was, I see that we've invested so much in early learning centers, and we've talked so much about Head Start, and we've talked so much about early Head Start, and all of those are tremendously important. But what about other kids? Where do other children go? We know that from national research that there are kids still out there. We know that looking at our numbers, especially children from birth to age 3, they weren't represented in all of the numbers that we saw when we started looking at early centers and Head Start and early Head Start. So our question was, kids have to be somewhere else. Where are they? And so we came up with that family child care represents a really important source of child care, especially for those that may be economically disadvantaged. And that's across the state. And that's not just here, that's in other places, but for the state of Louisiana, particularly in rural communities. However, despite us knowing this, family child care has not been included in our unified quality rating system to this point. Our focus and our targets and our support has not necessarily been on family child care. And so we decided to really hold ourselves accountable and start thinking, just like I asked in the question at the beginning of the presentation, how many of you all went to family child care, or have children, sent your children there, or keep children yourself? And so that was a part of the equation that we felt like we really needed to address. And so that's where we started with thinking about, how do we incorporate family child care in this conversation if we are really looking to truly have a unified quality rating system, if we are really looking for offering parents a wide array and families of early childhood, having a complete and all-encompassing portfolio where families truly have the option to make a choice for what's the best fit for them. And so the first thing we realize is that there are families who choose family child care, and it's not just for one reason. It may be that homes are, they're more like consistent with a caregiver, that continuity of care. They're smaller, the flexibility in hours based off what a parent or parents may need. And the thing is, there are fewer children, it's less structured, so a little bit easier to make that transition and adjustment. And for some kids and children, it's just better accommodating based off of children's individual needs of whatever it is. And so again, to ensure that as the Department of Education, we are really, really thinking about how can we have and provide access to high quality care for all children, we're really looking to incorporate family child care into our overall strategy for addressing those concerns. Let's see. All right. So the first thing we had to do before you start answering all these questions in our head was, we really need to stop and take a minute. You know, before you go and just make rapid changes to anything, one of the first things you should do is really think about addressing, you know, what do you have? What do you know? Nobody wants to duplicate efforts. Nobody wants to step on toes and or push down things from the top when you really hadn't talked to the people who do the work. You talk to the people who are consumers. Like you all said, you know, I've sent my children to family child care. I went to family child care myself, or, you know, I'm a family child care provider. So in order to really be fair, be wise, and to really have a process that is genuine and authentic and reflective of what is best practices for family child care providers. One of the places we chose to start was in our own backyard and to get an overview of what's going on in Louisiana. So like much of the nation, we face challenges related to supporting and sustaining family child care, first of all. And we think when we talk about those challenges, some of those things are first and foremost, there's been a decline in a limited number of family child care providers in our state who are registered and who are certified. We do honestly have a minimal understanding of the health, the safety, and the quality of care that's being provided in family child care. We've had minimal levers to really support and enhance the overall quality of family child care. We have had limited support, and there's limited networking opportunities for family child care providers to even just engage and not feel so siloed and so alone, which is what some of you all mentioned earlier. And the other thing is a wide range of family child care providers are operating in the state. And so you may have some that have been keeping children a very long time who are excellent, who have activities, who are engaging, who think of themselves as a small business. But you may have people who are just starting out, people who may just be watching one or two kids just for a friend on a regular basis. But to that avail where we know that there's a wide range of providers operating, we currently have a one-size-fits-all model or approach to how we think about family child care, how we approach family child care. And so that in itself is one of the challenges that we are holding ourselves to really addressing, to really thinking, if there's a wide range of providers that operate in the state, how then do we pivot and shift from the way that we've approached it to thinking more about how are we now responsive to what we know? Because when you know better, you should do better. So over the course of years, we've seen a steady and dramatic decline in the number of family child care providers that are actually registered and certified to enroll children through our child care subsidy, which we call CCARE. With the use of our preschool development grant, which we call our PDG, we've really designed and implemented a family child care pilot during the 2019-2020 year to think about all those things I've talked about before, to think about how we engage centers, to think about how we've been working to have a unified quality system, to think about what are the supports that are needed. How do we then have spaces and provide access to high quality child care for all children? And so our approach is this year, we decided to use it as a learning year. We've had a pilot where we engaged registered family child care providers in a family child care network. And that's designed where we could learn more about the providers, where we could really focus on collaboration. We can look at how do we improve quality, and then really to use all these things that we've learned from the pilot to think about how do we support and develop policy that will then, for lack of a better word, put family child care providers on a map and on a path to where we can now start to recognize them and support them based off what's needed. Then we plan to use the lessons learned during the pilot to inform our long-term strategy for really working with family child care. Let's chat. I've talked a lot, said a mouthful. I really think it's important though to give you all a good grasp. Sometimes we don't understand, what things look like. And so I want to take this time to ask if you would just drop in the chat box, what challenges does your particular community and or, I've also worked with other states, really currently face when it comes to thinking about and to addressing family child care? Again, what challenges does your particular community face when it comes to working with family child care? Oh. Safety for the children. Thank you for sharing. What do you do when a provider is sick? So providers being silo, working alone. Curriculum for family child care. Oh, it's hard finding a good a good child care facility. Having problems providing child care according to state stipulations. Again, affording a good curriculum. Great. Sometimes there are unqualified providers to meet the needs, low income. the importance of support they can receive and the benefits of belonging to a network. What about providing food or snack? All of these are wonderful things. And again, thank you so much. 2 thumbs up. Some of these challenges that you all are listing are challenges that we've heard as we've engaged with other states, as we've engaged with other researchers, as we've engaged with other providers. The other thing I want to be honest with you is I had the opportunity with this is we actually went to other states, and I've had the opportunity to talk to family child care providers where providers have been doing wonderful work, and they have a network and they have an organized group, but some of these same challenges are what they are naming. And so, one, it was good to know that we were at least attempting to solve a problem that's not just our own. And then 2, we had resources and we had people that we were able to reach out to and connect with in other places who shared some of these challenges, but we could also partner with to get ideas and even feedback on how we approach things. But one of our biggest, I think, advantages was that we intentionally and purposely thought about when we get ready to make this move and thinking about what does family child care look like, the first thing we need to do is we need to reestablish our relationship with family child care providers, and we need to re-engage them. And so this is a situation to where we have been honest and open with saying, what is it that, how do we measure quality? And we say class and interactions, but then what is already happening in family child care? What do providers need? And then really having collaboration as we move forward, because that's one of the things that we've heard time and time again from other states and with family child care providers saying that, it means so much more when I have an opportunity to partner with the state and say, or I have a voice. So many times I feel like as a family child care provider, we are left from the table. And so we have been intentional about saying, how are we going to move forward with this? How are we going to move the needle, and who should be included? And when we say who, we make sure to try to create space for family child care providers because we know that they are on the ground doing this work every day. So let's shift and let's talk about our family child care pilot. So again, like I said before, one of the biggest ways that we measure success is thinking about the closeness to children. Those that are most positioned to make those decisions and to impact the learning that happens every day. And when we think about change, we really, really start the work at a small scale with innovation, with innovative educators. So that would be like our pilot participants. We already have some family child care providers where we saw a dwindling number. We also had a stark number of pilot participants, people that just stayed. Like we saw numbers go down, but there were some family child care providers that were still there. And so calling them innovative because through the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, the changes, the declining number, we still saw that they were there. So really step 1 for us is start the work at a small scale, which is through our pilot, and then learn from that and move forward. 2, encourage projects that grow to scale. 3, nurturing and assisting that expansion, really thinking about and codifying those changes in policy, and then really thinking about those changes and embedding them in the system as we think about how to plan for overall statewide support. So again, starting small, engaging people that it affects, listening to them, and then really growing our pilot and moving forward. So with our pilot, our overall goal, our big goal was to just from year 1, just to develop a plan to just bring family child care into the overall statewide early childhood network. So we wanted to learn about the unique challenges and needs of family child care providers that you all have mentioned in the chat box. We wanted to take time to really be specific and define different components of quality in family child care settings, because we know that while family child care is care, we also know that it's in someone's home, the setting is different. So really thinking about what's the right thing to look at in that situation, identifying successful supports and strategies for improving quality and overall family child care? And then how do we allow providers to network with other providers and offer feedback? Because again, like someone mentioned in the checkbox, sometimes with the family child care providers that work is siloed, they're alone. They're having to be the teacher, the director, the business owner, the cook, the parent educator. And so really recognizing that while child care centers may have a larger space and more children, they also have different people that can fill those roles. Whereas with a family child care provider, it's usually just that one person wearing so many different hats. So in thinking about how to think about and how to support family child care providers, we had to be really, really aware of that. Let's see. Uh-oh. Sorry about that, friends. I've got some jumping issues going on. Okay. So let's talk about our specific family child care pilot in Louisiana. We started this year with 2 regions of the state, and we administered, we call them our pilot operators, were CCRNRs in those regions. We did Children's Coalition in the Northeast region and Greater Baton Rouge Volunteers of America. Let me just be explicit in saying, you know, I'm like, well, why these areas? Well, we picked these 2 areas first and foremost because they stood up and they expressed an interest in wanting to work with family and child care providers. The second thing is, as we talked about the huge decline in the number of family child care providers across the nation, but also in our state, they also maintained positive relationships and they offered support to family child care providers in a time where the focus had kind of sort of shifted. So again, this was not something that they had to do on a level, but this is something that they chose to do. And they saw a need for it. And they felt that the family child care providers were important. And while there was a shift and they had to work with that shift and working with centers, they never forgot about family child care providers. So just a general overview of our pilot. We conducted a year-long pilot, and we used the information to really think about statewide strategy. So for year 1, we had 37 family child care providers from those 2 regions. These providers participated in observation using class that we talked about. And since this was our first pilot year, we also used FICRS, which is the Family Child Care Environmental Rating Systems. And we really, again, thinking about that particular home setting. We use class as a way to think about quality of interactions with in between the provider and the child or children. But then we use FICRS kind of sort of as a planning tool to assess the environment as far as what the home looked like and how we could help providers think about and assess what's the setting that they have, what's their environment, and think about planning and moving so that we can have optimal interactions. The participants also received one-on-one coaching. They participated and received monthly professional development and support from our Tulane University mental health consultants. They attended family child care network meetings that were hosted and facilitated by their RNRs. And they were also asked to count and report the number of children by funding type and age enrolled in their care. And for all of this participation in year 1, they did receive quarterly stipends. And again, this is a huge shift to the point that a lot of you all mentioned as far as thinking about how does a provider wear multiple hats? And, you know, there's an issue with quality. There's no defined definition of what quality looks like in family child care. So all of those challenges that you all address, that's what this pilot was trying to think about. That's what we were trying to really think of. What does quality look like? What is the home setting? What could we do to support? How do we keep them from feeling so alone and so siloed? What could we do at the state level to provide support so that the providers feel that they can really be in a position to one, identify what quality looks like, and then two, move in a direction to where the things that they're doing that they have right to check the box and keep doing those. But then maybe things that they needed some support on, they now could have a place to look for. They now have a place to say, okay, I need help with this. And then they could have a coach, or they have professional development that's targeted and specifically just for the work that they do, because it's different providing care in this setting than in any other. So during the fall, like I said, there were a total of 37 participants, and this is what our progress looked like. So at the end of the fall, we know that there were about 186 children being served between the two areas. Volunteers of America recruited and maintained 21 participants. There were 21 figures and class observations conducted, and we used that as baseline data just to see where our providers were. They provided over 4,900 minutes of coaching. They had 8 meetings with participants. 5 of those were actual trainings, and 3 were network meetings. The other thing that we were looking at was thinking about our early childhood ancillary certificate programs. And at that point in time, providers did not participate, but talked about and were interested in having that as an option. They reported a total of 104 children that were served across each one of their homes in the pilot. Children's Coalition, it's our northeastern part. They recruited and maintained about 16 participants. They completed 16 figures and class observations. They provided over 5,800 minutes of coaching. They had 6 meetings. There were 2 pilot participants in their area, though, who actually enrolled in the ECAC programs, and they reported a total of 82 children being served across pilot participants. So now we want to talk a little bit about the class scores. So like on the front end, I shared with you data regarding what class looked like for early childhood centers. Again, we took some of the same approach in really thinking about what does the class score, or what does the interactions and that level of quality that we use for childcare centers, how does that relate and how does that connect with this first year of piloting that we did with our family childcare providers? And as you can see, there's a distribution across ranging from 1.5 all the way to 6.49, but that's to be expected. That just tells us that we have a need for coaching that's at different levels. With our family childcare participants, the scores tended to be lower when we looked at instructional domain for class. And that's when we talk about instructional support and engaged support for learning. And that's in both of our area, the pre-K and the toddler domain. And then when we look at the overall, the average class score for family child care pilot participants, what we did find though, is that it was actually quite close and similar to the average class score for family child care providers in 2015 and 2016. That is so significant because that tells us that just like centers, the first year they did class, it's very close and similar to that first year. And then remember from those other slides that we looked at, with each year of intentional support provided, targeted coaching, things like that, we saw a steady increase and a steady gain across each one of those types. And so our hope is that just like it was a process and we started class and we started at a place, but each year we supported and each year we were intentional about our coaching and we saw growth. We are hoping that this is the starting point for family child care providers. And just like there was growth, we're hoping that we can do the same thing with family child care providers as we really, really work to engage more. Yeah. So I know that someone asked about, or just kind of sort of posed the idea of during COVID-19, you know, there's a shift in thinking about all of that. And so we also want you to know that during this pilot, while that was not something that we anticipated, while that's not, you know, of course, as we were designing and working with our pilot participants, just like it caught all of us off guard, we had to learn to be responsive to the needs of providers, family child care providers during the pandemic as well. And so what that did, that gave us an opportunity to really be intentional in thinking about how then do we continue to support and provide resources for family child care providers. I will share with you that I had a call last week with some other states who work with family child care providers. And while they have things that are established, they're part of their quality rating systems. One of the things I heard time and time again was that even though there was money out there, that it went to the centers or it went to schools or went to other agencies, and that family child care providers were left out. And when we were able to share our strategy and how we included family child care providers in our pilot and how we use it as an opportunity to really ramp up and increase services and resources, they were really, really surprised and shocked. And a lot of people have called and asked to just have some sit down and talk time with us. So that gives us an idea that we must be moving in the right direction as we think about how do we support and how do we work with family child care providers. So during COVID-19, we made sure that not only our providers, but our families and the children had access to mental health consultation. It never stopped. In the pilot, they had access. We switched to virtual meetings. We switched to making sure that there were phone calls. We switched to make sure that whatever family child care providers needed and they were having before that made them successful, we tried to find a way to make sure that we can continue those services. There were frequent check-in and calls from coaches, from mental health consultants, and even from the Department of Education. We were intentional about any time we found resources, we were making sure we were sharing with them, whether it was about materials and supplies, or whether it was about small business loans or grant opportunities, we were still sharing that information out. Our providers asked about virtual coaching, and so we continued. We used Skype. We used, they used their phones to say, okay, I've got this issue during nap time, or whatever it was that they needed support on. We were able to still have our coaches coach and work with them through each one of these issues during the pandemic. We also participated in virtual network meetings and trainings, and then the state was intentional about when we put out opportunities for centers, we also were very, very intentional in making sure that we also included family child care providers. So I'm gonna take a minute and stop and kind of sort of look in the chat box, because I know, again, we've talked a lot. So we've got a question that says, how do you provide coaching for family child care? Well, one of the things that we did is that when we work with our R&Rs, just like there are coaches for centers, we also talked with the R&R, and we wanted to be sure that there were coaches that actually went out to the homes of family child care providers. We used our class and our figures, results and observations to really drive and look at what were areas of need, what were areas that the providers could use support in. We also had very candid conversations in asking the providers, what do you feel good about? What do you feel like you need help with? And those things that they said they needed help with, that's what the coach did. They went and pulled resources, or they partnered and paired with our mental health consultants to provide resources, to come out and do observations, to come out and model, to come out and check on progress with the providers based off whatever it is they identified as an area of need. So, like I mentioned earlier, just like I asked you all, what were some of the challenges, or when I showed the picture initially of children sitting in front of TV, and then we had really nice things that looked like a classroom, but it was a family child care setting, just like we have perceptions of what family child care is, we knew that right off the bat when we talked about measuring quality in family child care, we knew that there were going to be some questions. We were very aware that there were going to be some perceptions. And so I'm going to take a minute now, and I'm going to ask you, when you hear, or if you were to hear someone saying, okay, let's measure the quality in family child care, drop in the chat box, what would be your initial response? How would you perceive that? We got somebody saying great. Anybody else? Again, we got another great. Talking and listening with children. Good. What else do we have? What's your initial reaction to someone saying we're going to go in family child care and we're going to look at what quality looks like? You would need to gather the data to engage with providers to see what's going on. It's developing. Good. What else? Responsive caregiving. Observing the interactions and providers with children. Good. So many family child care facilities are different. What's the constant to measure quality? Great question. That's good. Right. That's the question. How do you measure quality? Educators, beneficial. Great. Parent and teacher relationships. Great. Exactly. Yes, 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 and yes again. Those are some of the same things we thought about as, okay, we're getting ready to approach this work with family child care providers. What does it look like to measure family child care, the quality? And again, we use class because again, class is the interactions in between adults and children. And then the second thing though, that we also had to wrestle with is, well, how do we support family child care providers? And so there were lots of different perceptions. So let's look at those. So during the pilot kickoff meeting, and when we were preparing for starting our network meetings, we as the department learned that both those people, those participants that were actually providers that signed up to be a part of the pilot, as well as coaches, already had some ideas and some initial feelings and concerns. So pilot participants were really curious about our re-engagement, the state's re-engagement. And rightfully so. You know, if you've watched child care centers really benefit and you've seen them do the work, you want to know, like, what does the state, basically, what does the state want? How are they going to re-engage? And so pilot participants were very open with me in saying that we're curious about what it is you say you're going to do versus what it is you're really going to do. They were really nervous when we talked about the coaching, as someone asked about what does it look like. It meant that you were going to have someone come inside your home and assess and coach and model. And so that was a source of tension for pilot participants. They were just concerned about being observed altogether. They were excited, however, about opportunities to network with other providers. One of the things that I've heard from family child care providers over and over again is the work can feel really, really lonely. You're by yourself. Like I said before, and someone mentioned in the chat box, you know, you're cooking, you're cleaning, you are caring for children, you're managing your books, you're working with parents, you're taking on multiple roles. And so sometimes no one understands that except for people who are doing that work, but because you're so busy doing that work, you don't get an opportunity to connect with those other people. And then they were really kind of sort of unclear about the process of coaching and mental health consultant and visits. They told me at first all they heard was lots of people coming in and out of my house doing a lot of stuff. I don't really know what that means. Let's see what it looks like. The coaches were curious about our re-engagement as well. They wanted to know, like, what does this mean? And then thinking about how are we going to support family child care providers. They were also nervous, just as providers were nervous about having someone in their home. The coaches were nervous about being in someone else's home. The presence, not knowing what that looks like, you know, really being intentional and just open and honest about, you know, I'm going to different people's homes. What does this look like? They were worried about providers' reactions to being observed. Like, how would they receive that information? How would they take it? What does that mean? Thinking about how the network meetings would go, you know, how do we pick topics? How do we wrangle in this group? Like, what do we tell them? What do we train them on? And then they were really excited about the opportunity to offer support and coaching because that's just what they love to do. while they worried about a lot of these other things, they also really saw that they could be beneficial and really help when it came to helping family child care providers. And so just the chance to be able to go in and do that was exciting for the coaches. I saw that I had some comments. I'm looking at the chat box. Oh, great. Okay. So those were the initial feelings and concerns. Just by a show of hands, like, is anybody surprised? Does this throw anybody for a loop? Are any of these reactions or initial feelings or concerns, is that surprising to you all? Is that surprising to anybody? Raise your hands. Yes, no, in the chat box. Nope. Someone said, nope, not surprising. Raised hands, thank you. Not at all, not at all. Someone said completely valid. Nope, makes sense to me. Right, and so in thinking about doing this pilot work, that's exactly what we had to be ready for. So while at the State Department, we thought that this is wonderful and this is great, we also had to be in tune, realistic, and just in tune to the actual providers that we're working with. And you want to always make sure that when working and engaging with family child care providers, we're not being dismissive of their feelings. We're not being dismissive of their concerns. We're not being dismissive of the issues or the relationships. And so, again, I just want to stress that one of the biggest things for us as we thought about this pilot was building relationships and really thinking about how does this become a learning opportunity. This piece of information, this chart was a driving force in how we approached wanting to talk about quality and how we approached wanting to provide supports, because each one of these feelings and concerns was something that we thought about each time we move. We wanted to really think about making a move that would affect providers. Here we go. Let's go to the next slide. So once the pilot got moving, we wanted to do a temperature check. We want to do another check-in. So just like they shared with us their initial concerns and things that they were worried about, we also, again, were very, very intentional about making sure, just checking, like, how are you? Are you okay? What's good? What's bad? So we conducted focus groups with the pilot participants, and we also scheduled regular check-ins with the operators as a way to really understand and to look at any concerns that anyone may have right then. We did not want to wait to the end of the pilot and then turn around and address anything. We wanted to really, really engage with the providers, the coaches, the R&Rs all along the process, so that if there were changes we need to make, or if there were things that we needed to address, we could do that. So if I had to sum up one word to the perception as far as reactions, it would be we were responsive. And so with pilot participants, they really voiced that it wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be. Again, the initial surprise or the initial discomfort with having people in your home and doing things like that was, they were very explicit in saying, it's not as bad as I thought. They actually took steps and inquired about what happens after observation. Okay, we've got this coach. They did this observation. What's next? They were eager to work more with the coaches and mental health consultants because they really saw the benefit. They felt supported. Those questions that they'd had before that they really didn't have an answer for, they now have identified that there are people who are there to help them get those solutions, work through those problems so that they can become better at doing what they do. And then they started to actually request specific topics and actually help us in the planning of their own network meetings. You know, they would call me or they would talk to, as I went to their trainings, and say, you know what, I've got questions about licensing. Can we talk about licensing? And I was very honest in saying, well, I'm not a licensing specialist, but I do work with licensing. How about we have licensing come out and speak at one of our network meetings, and you can get those questions that you have together and you can ask them and we can get those answers and that can help you. what about our subsidy, Ms. Susan? Can you talk to us about CCAP? Well, let me be honest. I am not the CCAP person. However, I do work with the CCAP person. Would it be beneficial if we brought someone here to talk about CCAP so that you can understand the process and you can understand your agreements and you can understand what changes and you can understand how to access these things? And so just through that dialogue and having those focus groups, we saw that there was a shift definitely in how pilot participants thought about the engagement that they were having with us, where we became a tool and a resource for them to help them with the work that they have, the work that they do and the questions that they have. With the coaches, we also saw their reactions during the focus group was they expressed that one of the biggest things that really helped them to be successful was rapport building, like really being intentional and taking time about getting to know the provider, making the providers feel comfortable, just really explaining things before jumping and diving into coaching or just before doing anything. Just building trust was really important as they worked with the providers. They were very explicit in noting that there was a wide range in observation scores. Like everything wasn't horrible, everything wasn't great, everything wasn't perfect in the middle. There was a range, and so they became responsive to that range as they thought about their coaching. They identified that the data from the observations was a great way to plan for individual and group training. So one of the concerns they had was, and one of the questions that someone asked in the chat box is like, what does that coaching look like? How do you decide on that coaching? The data served as a baseline, and that's really how they planned for what they were going to do, whether it was in a group training or whether it was for each one of the individual providers that were participating in the pilot. And then they stated that the network meetings and the trainings, they saw it was a way to really bring providers together and responsive to providers saying, I feel alone. I feel that the work I do is kind of sort of put me in a place and I'm siloed. So that was really, really beneficial as well. So one of the parts of the pilot is that we also had the wonderful opportunity to work with LSU to help us as we work through this work. And so I'm going to turn it over so that they can talk about how wonderful their research was and all the things that they were able to see as we work through the pilot.
Hi, everybody. This is Erin, and I'm going to walk you through on this next slide just the initial goals that we had in forming this partnership with the LDOE in order to learn more about family child care providers. So our purpose with our research and our partnership with LDOE was to first and foremost just learn new information from the providers about their unique challenges and about their needs. And so Brittany will tell you in just a minute sort of how we went about accomplishing that and what types of measures we used. We were also interested in assessing the quality of childcare that was provided in Louisiana family home settings and see if there were certain variables that may affect the quality of that care. We were also looking to evaluate the coaching and networking interventions that support quality of care that is provided by family child care providers. And finally, we were interested in looking at this intervention that Susan just walked you all through and learn more about what the providers thought about that, how it all went, what, if any, possible effects it may have on child outcomes and on the children who are receiving care in these family child care settings. So Brittany's going to walk you through on this next slide here a little bit more information about our methodology and how we went about answering those questions that I talked about.
Yeah, hi, this is Brittany. So what we did with our state research partnership is we invited all study participants or everybody that was already included in the LDOE's pilot program with the coaching. We invited them to participate in a research study. Again, this was voluntary for human subjects protection. And so then once providers agreed to kind of schedule an appointment with us, then Erin and I visited each of the family child care providers and we completed an in-person interview with them. We also completed quite an extensive provider survey. So they completed a survey and then we went and picked it up. And then we also returned to the homes, and after the providers and us received parent permission to complete assessments for the children that were in their care. So if they had children that were 2.5 years of age or older, we completed the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, so testing their receptive language. And then we also completed the Woodcock-Johnson for the ECAD, the early childhood assessments with the children in their care. And then in addition, we're still kind of in our preliminary analysis phase, but what we are doing is we are looking at how the class data and the Vickers data helps predict or might mediate the effects of the child outcome data. So, you know, based on the class scores, does that affect, you know, children's outcomes? So their receptive language, their pre-academic skills, getting ready for kindergarten. So that's what it looked like. And then right now, we're actually currently in the second phase of completing phone interviews with the providers, and we're asking kind of follow-up questions about their coaching experiences, about the entire pilot program that Dr. Clark has just spent this presentation kind of describing to you. And then we're also adding in, just because of the current state of the world right now with the current pandemic, we've also added in questions about COVID-19 and how that has impacted their family childcare business and the children and families in their care. So we are anxious to kind of analyze that data too. Thank you, Susan. So some of the preliminary findings from those that initial qualitative interview include that the providers were aware of the importance of interactions and activities and play with the children and interacting with the children and providing educational opportunities for them. The providers were regularly participating and interacting with children during their activities. The providers stated they would benefit from similar supports and resources as child care center providers receive. So those, the early childhood ancillary certificate scholarships, the coaching, the tax credits, they would prefer to benefit from that also. Many of the family child care providers had prior experience working in a center as a teacher and saw the family child care setting as the next step in their career trajectory. So many of them have come from that child care setting, center setting, and we're kind of transferring that knowledge and translating that to their in-home child care practice. Almost every provider reported that they loved what they do. They loved the individualized care that they were providing to the children, and that they loved following children one-on-one. So many of these providers had children, you know, from a few weeks after they were born until they went to Head Start, or they went to, you know, a public pre-K program or kindergarten. So they really got to know that child, that family, and kind of grow with them. And they really loved that part of the process, which is different from when they were in centers and, you know, had their specific age classroom that they worked in. And almost every single one of them said they do not identify as babysitters, and they don't want people to have that impression that they want them to see them as early childhood educators and family child care professionals. And like I said, this data is still, these are our initial findings, preliminary findings. We're kind of in that, the meat of our data analysis portion right now.
Thank you. So I want to take a minute to just pause and ask, does anybody have any questions about the LSU research or comments? If so, feel free to drop those in the chat box. I'll wait a minute or so to look at that, and then we can respond. Okay, no stress. That's all right. Thanks. Thank you all. And if anybody has any questions that you can think of later, maybe about it, feel free to drop it in the chat box and we'll make sure we go back and try to, oh, here we go. We do have one. Did they ask about perceptions of their role as family members?
Yeah, so absolutely great question. Yes, so we asked in our interview, we haven't completely analyzed this question, but we did ask them, how do the parents of the children you're with or that you care for, how do they see you? And we asked that question in the survey data. So we do have that information. Unfortunately, we don't have it analyzed quite yet, but stay tuned because we're definitely hoping to present more on this in the future with LDOE and also have some publications come out about their perception, the parents and their family child care providers, their perception.
One of the other things I want to just piggyback on what Dr. Wittenberg has also said is we also are planning to continue this pilot work. We don't think that it's just one thing like, oh, it's a pilot, it's done, let's go and do all of this. We know that this is a process. We know that we want to make sure that we are addressing the issues of the family child care providers, but we are also thinking about how we are approaching quality in a way that's responsive to this particular setting. And so we are planning right now to do a year 2 of this pilot, so where we will continue to work with the pilot participants, the 37, as many that want to continue. We're making way to keep doing that, to keep offering support, to keep doing that. Then we're also thinking about how then could we expand maybe into other areas to do another round of piloting, just so that we're getting and capturing the experiences. Just like these R&Rs have relationships already. We said that was one of the reasons why we picked them. That's one of the reasons why they stood up, why they stood out. And so also thinking about now, how do we particularly or possibly go into other areas maybe that have those relationships, but maybe they're not as rich, or maybe there are other places where there's a disconnect with the R&Rs. And so again, thinking about how can we use the information that we've learned from this pilot, what was successful, what was not, like we've worked with LSU, using the voice of the family child care providers, thinking about our focus groups, also thinking about the information from our coaches as far as rapport building is so big, relationship building, making sure that the providers are part of the process. So taking all these things that we've learned from this first year of piloting, from all these different facets, and then using that to grow and to engage more family child care providers so that we can help and support them to continue doing the work that they're doing, and then to help where they may need that support and help. So to do that in a way that's very responsive and that is engaging. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the lessons learned. So LDOE, the pilot operators, the coaches, the researcher, we've all learned a lot from just the fall portion of the family child care pilot, and even moving into now, we're dealing with the pandemic, and just we've had so many different experiences. And so some of the main takeaways for us is just like centers, the quality of interactions, the environmental provisions, and the business practices of family child care providers. There's a range. We didn't see that all providers were awesome or great at all these things. We didn't see that all providers were just, they were on the lower end of the scale. We saw a range just like we see in centers. And so just thinking about the similarities as opposed to all the differences was a main point of there. The average fall overall class score for family child care providers was very similar, like I mentioned, to the average overall class score observed in child care centers the first year they did class. The first year we used it statewide. So again, that's a ray of hope in that just like the center started at a place and then we saw growth we're hoping that that's the same thing we see here by being targeted and thoughtful about our supports and attentive to what's going on, thinking how can we grow that. The coaches and providers reported that evidence-based coaching has already had an impact on the way providers interact with children. Like I said before, we had a range of providers. There was one particular participant that had done it. She just admitted at the beginning, you know, I'm tired. I really love what I do. I know it's important, but I just need something to help me refocus and re-energize. And she said that she was very explicit in that I'm happier. I feel like I impact and I do a better job because I now know that, one, there are other people out there who are doing the work that I'm doing. Two, I also have a place now that if I need help, I'm not just spinning my wheels. I have support. I have a network of other people that I can talk to as far as what works for them and what doesn't. And then I also have coaches who can come in and work with me one-on-one on just things that I need. So it's really, really impacted the way that they work with children. We've also learned that using quality measurement tools has really, really equipped our coaches as well to really have good information to support goal setting and coaching. Again, I just go back to the question someone asked because I thought about it too. Like, how do you coach a family child care provider? Like, how do you go in someone's home and coach? Like, what am I worried about? How do I make sure I'm not overstepping boundaries? You know, what are the topics? Do I just choose random topics? But we've seen that when we have a measurement tool that is targeted and that has very, very clearly defined domains and very clearly defined actions, what these things look like, that it really equips coaches to really go in and to support providers move from one level to another. We saw that pilot participants viewed the supports and the networking that they received, those opportunities, as beneficial just overall. And we saw that the providers expressed interest in participation if there was a system that was offered to them that had incentives for adhering to more regulations. And I think that's one of the things that we were very apprehensive about, just to name it honestly. You know, moving and working with family child care providers, we want to provide these supports. We're hearing people say, you know, we want to be considered, we want to be looked at, we want to be thought about, but then being very frank and saying, we hear that, but also know that with those incentives comes a set of rules and regulations that you would have to adhere to. And so the coaching is one way, the mental health consultants, the class observations, the figures observations, those are just some of the things we piloted with them to help them understand that there's a process that goes along with receiving incentives and there are consequences. And so as they participate in this process, you know, we heard that from them in the beginning. We did a check with them towards the middle and then checking in with them again. They're still standing up and saying, like, you know, we're still interested in participating if we could. If there was a system that looked at us and looked at our quality, we would be interested in participating in that.
Susan, we have a couple questions.
Yes. Okay. Let me.
So I can read them to you if you want.
Yes, please do, because I can't get to them. Thank you.
It's okay. It's okay. So one of the questions is, tell us more about the FICRs that we use.
Okay. So the FICRs is the Family Child Care Environmental Rating System. It looks at like literally the environment. So it thinks about each of the like it breaks up the homesteading into areas. And so it looks like furniture and spatial settings. It looks at practices as far as hygiene and health and safety. It does look at interactions, but it's not as in depth as the class tool. And it looks at relationships and business practices on a smaller scale. And so the coaches went in and it has very prescriptive item numbers. The coach goes in and they look at the particular items, and then based on a scale, the providers are giving a rating, and then those numbers are tallied, and then they have a score. And what we do with the FICRs is we use that as a planning tool. And so we found that with some of our family child care providers, they didn't have enough materials. So maybe there weren't enough things to incorporate or encourage science exploration, or there wasn't enough appropriate size furniture for children based on, we found that from the figures. So we use that information to also support the family child care providers that were in the pilot by offering, we call them environmental enhancement grants. And so some of the providers reported that, I've got kids that get into it and they argue. And when we look at the class scores, we saw that it also was like, there may not be enough materials or you need to work on your management. But then providers would say, well, I can only have these one or two things. And so I need help and support trying to figure out how do I then include more toys and more resources so the kids can have, so that I can give them options and I can have them, talk with them about sharing and using those things. But let me just be frank, it's very hard to do if as a family child care provider, you have limited resources and you can only get one or two things. So again, like I said, we use the figures as a tool for really looking at the environment and then planning on how we could maybe do some room rearrangement, how we could then think about, could we put out more toys or could we do that? And with that, then we saw interactions and we saw that their environment was better and we saw that the children's responses to some things were better. And then we used the class to really think about how now do we then interact with the children when we have our space set up in a better way. And when we have access to more tools and resources, how do we use these as learning tools and how do we use these as instructional resources? So that's how we looked at the figures, and that's why we did the figures and the class in the home setting.
Thanks, Susan. We've got another question earlier on that I wanted, that would be helpful. So why was there such a dramatic decline in registered home care providers? Are they just not registering, or is the registration expensive or complicated?
So we think that it's a combination of actually those things. So one of the things we saw as we looked at the chart that you saw with the huge decline was, and these are just anecdotally. So these are, even when we talked to the providers in the pilot, some of them said, well, I remember when we started and there were lots of people, family child care providers. And I asked, well, what were some of the things that changed? And I said, one of the things is background check, like criminal background checks. So at one point in time, everyone in the home didn't have to have a background check. So when that happened, those are expensive. And so some providers said that they weren't able to pay for everyone in their home to pay for that. So that was a tick mark. We also heard that switching from things like paper checks to direct deposit, like that was a flag. Some people dropped off. Some people said that just navigating licensing and registering, like they weren't really sure what that meant. They weren't really sure. They didn't really feel supported in doing that. So they didn't, they became a family home provider, but they never registered with the state and never, signed up to take CCAP. That was a tick. The other thing is some people love caring for kids, but they weren't really sure about running a business. So their business practices, it wasn't beneficial for them, or they lost funds for that. So then that was a tick. So it was just a variety of things. Like we can't pinpoint just one thing that really contributed to the overall decrease in decline. But as we talked to the providers, as we talked to other states, those were some of the things that was named. One of the things I thought was most interesting, though, from our pilot participants, was that they were like, we don't have anybody else to train to do that. And I said, well, tell me more about that. They said, well, we don't have people or young people who want to come in and who want to be family child care providers. So as we get older, or as people choose not to keep children anymore, there's not a refilling of the bucket, so to say. And so they said, I think it's really important that people know that this is an option of becoming a family child care provider. And we are more than babysitters. And so they said to just the idea, the perception that other people have of the care that they provide is not always positive and it's not always attractive. So they find too that people aren't coming to this profession as well because of the perception of the way that they are perceived. And sometimes it's babysitters. I don't want to just be a babysitter.
Thanks, Susan. We have one more question.
Okay.
How do you become a coach to help family childcare providers?
Well, that's something that we're exploring as of right now. With the two R&Rs that we used, they both already had coaches on staff. And so one of the things we did was we honestly sort of just worked together, like literally from the state level as far as doing research for us. At this point, there's no set formal way to become a family child care provider coach. We really are using this year to think about that question ourselves, to develop tools and resources, to really think about, as if we're asking people to engage more with family child care providers, then we need to help prepare people. And so this upcoming year, as we're thinking about doing pilot 2, I've also been working on a series of trainings to support family child care providers as far as coaches go. So thinking about, I know one of the things that's been asked from the providers is, we want business practices. So then I am working at the state level with other departments to think about, is there a training that we can do to train our coaches that are already in the field to learn more about business practices that are specific for family child care providers? The answer is yes. And so we contacted that organization. They came in, they did what's called a train the trainer session over the course of a couple of days. Those trainers and coaches came in. I also became a trainer. So I'm working on not asking coaches to do things that I can't do myself. And so we went through the training together. We have tools and resources, and those are things that we are now able to support and at least help providers with at a basic level. But the other thing is, we also let the questions and the interests of the participants drive what we do. Again, like I said, we become responsive. So if it's, I need more coaching on, what's developmentally appropriate practice, we are, as in the coaches and myself at the department, are becoming trained on those things so that we can then train and work with our providers. So it's literally, at this point in time, we are working on developing tools and resources so that we have just what you're asking, a way of, or tools and resources or steps to becoming a coach. Because at this point in time, we don't have it. And so that's something that we're working on. Great question. Thank you. I think we've got time for maybe one more question, if anybody has one. Maybe not. Well, if not, I would like to say thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I am the person that right now that works the most with family child care providers. I will put my email address in the chat box so that you can have it. Again, the first step is basically just starting to have those conversations to identify where family child care providers are and to reach out to them and to really think about, how can we include you? How can we offer a seat at the table so that as we move forward, we're really thinking about what's best for the children in Louisiana and really, really working on making sure we have access to quality information, that we do that. And it starts with you. It starts with just the conversation and just the invitation. So again, thank you. I appreciate it. You all have been wonderful. You had wonderful questions. And if there's anything you need, you feel free to just email me and we can talk it out and walk it through together. Thanks. You all enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thank you to our presenters. That was very good information. We appreciate you guys being here to share for the Louisiana Department Ed 2020 Teacher Leaders Summit virtual series. And for the participants, please don't forget to complete your session evaluations using the Sketch app. See you guys later. Have a great afternoon.